You've seen the headlines, maybe even felt the weird mix of disgust and disbelief. A grown man, a prince, wrapped in power, ritual, secrecy, and yet utterly exposed. Prince Andrew was once a royal rock star, flashy, charmed, the Queen's favorite son. But behind the glitter, inside the 30-plus rooms of Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park, something darker was growing. Behavior so bizarre, so entitled, so out of step with reality that the cracks started right there, behind the palace doors. Insiders tell of a household ruled not by service but submission, not.
If you want more unfiltered royal truth, not the palace-approved version, hit like, subscribe and tell us in the comments, are Beatrice and Eugenie breaking the cycle or repeating history? Stay tuned. The tea only gets hotter.
Alleged that Andrew expected total deference, that his household staff were there to serve and not question his actions. And do it wasn't for small things. We're talking ridiculous rituals, petty rules, humiliations for the tiniest perceived slights. One former maid claimed she had to spend up to half an hour arranging 70 teddy bears on Andrew's bed, in strict size order, because that's what he insisted. Another account described staff climbing for flights of stairs just to open curtains for him, even though he lay just a few feet away, in his own bedroom. One staffer told author Andrew Loney that during a storm in Northern Ireland, Andrew chastised his aide for not saying Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in full, and then allegedly called him King imbecile. Think about that. When access to real power fades, when the world no longer takes you seriously, you shrink into ritual, into domination, into petty power games. That's what appears to have happened. Then there was the insistence on titles and rituals that the outside world believed had been retired. Even after Andrew publicly stepped back from royal duties, insiders say at home he still required staff to bow and curtsy, to call him Your Royal Highness, even though the world recognized he no longer held the full duties of that title. Cosmopolitan the message: I am still beyond your rules. I still own this space. Privilege isn't just wealth. It's the expectation of immunity. The belief that laws, norms, decency, accountability, they don't apply to you. Andrew embodied that. While many were losing faith in the monarchy for secrecy and scandal, he doubled down. Lavish home, but no rent paid for decades. Royal Lodge, owned by the Crown Estate, but the Duke of York reportedly hadn't paid rent for 20 years. Wikipedia +1. He maintained a scale of living far removed from public duties. Staff, estate, luxury. The financial side is less exposed in the purely public sphere, but the signals are clear. A royal role that once provided prestige now provided nets, gifts, deals, favors. Behind the scenes, business interests, license to raise money, invite benefactors, link commercial deals. One Wikipedia summary suggests that Andrew had credible ties to overseas businessmen, even being linked with a Chinese businessman flagged for covert and deceptive activity. The line between royal duty and personal enrichment blurred. And when the world finally turned the lens toward his connection with Jeffrey Epstein and the broader scandal, the mask cracked. Andrew's public persona collapsed, his private world became open to scrutiny. In October 2025, King Charles III stripped Andrew of his titles and ordered his eviction from Royal Lodge. The palace finally said what many had believed: privilege will no longer protect all. But what does all this behavior, the catchphrase, the rituals, the mood of dominance, tell us? It tells us about an institution trapped between tradition and relevance. First, the culture of entitlement. Andrew didn't just have power, he expected obedience. His staff described a household running not by protocol but by fear. That puts the monarchy's narrative of service, duty, humility into brutal contrast. A culture that once celebrated service in the Queen and Philip now revealed, behind a gate, a world of do-it and power trips. Second, isolation and delusion. Andrew's reported insistence on being treated as royalty even after losing official roles suggests a man unable or unwilling to adapt. He was living in his own bubble, one where birthright outweighed accountability. That delusion didn't just alienate him from the public, it isolated him within his own family, the institution, his staff. Third, ethical rot and hidden finances. While public duty should bring transparency, the reports suggest networks of patronage, favors, expenses, absent oversight. The large scale of estate, unpaid rent, gifts and business deals raise systemic questions. Privilege without oversight is prescription for corruption. Fourth, institutional change. King Charles's decisive action, stripping titles and homes, marks a watershed. The monarchy is signaling, the old immunity ends here. If royals behave as if they're above rules, they'll be treated differently. That sets a new precedent. The collapse of Andrew's influence is therefore not just personal, but symbolic. It signals the end of an era House of York's dominance, royal excess, secrets under red carpets. It's the monarchy forced to modernize or die. The aftermath, irreversible damage. The royal brand is wounded, trust eroded. The palace now must rebuild credibility. Andrew's scandal becomes cautionary. Unchecked privilege can ruin not just the individual, but the institution. And for Andrew, possibility of criminal accountability, full exposure, legal peril looms. Though complex, the fact that he is no longer shielded is profound. Titles gone, leases ended. The protective cover is lifted. What we end with is this. Andrew revolting behavior behind palace doors isn't just naughty anecdotes. It's a portrait of entitlement collapsing. A royal home turned toxic. A system long cloaked in deference, finally illuminated. If his favorite phrase was "do it," then the palace's message back is, now we will do it too. Do the accountability. Do the reform. Do the transparency. Those doors once slammed shut behind secrets. Now, they're opening wide. And Andrew. His story stands as both tragedy and warning. Privilege untempered by accountability isn't strength, it's fragility. And once the mask falls, what remains is man, with no crown to hide behind. In sum, this is not merely about one prince's bad behavior. It's about how an age of royal impunity ended. It's about how entitlement met consequence. It's about how the culture of do it became the culture of having to do it differently. And as the monarchy enters a new era, the echoes from Andrew's reign, his catchphrase, his rituals, his behind-door cruelty remind us that transparency isn't just desirable, it's essential. The old house of privilege is being dismantled. Whether the new house is stronger remains to be seen. But make no mistake, this was the collapse of one era and the start of another. So, let's return to that phrase again, do it. 3 syllables. Bare. Sharp. A bark rather than a command. Insiders say it wasn't just a phrase. It was a mood. A posture. A declaration that within those walls, only one opinion mattered, his. Prince Andrew didn't ask, he ordered. And if you hesitated, if you dared question or correct, the consequences were swift humiliation, reassignment, or worse, invisibility in his world of inherited supremacy. The truth is, this wasn't simply about an entitled prince behaving badly. This was about a culture allowed to ferment, protected, even inside one of the most recognized institutions on earth. The monarchy, for all its regalia and centuries-old dignity, created an environment where powerful men could operate without checks. Andrew just happened to be the one who finally let the mask slip. Because what we're seeing, what staff whispered about behind closed doors and journalists spent years trying to piece together, is the fallout of a man born into reverence and shielded from reality. When you're raised never being told no, what happens when the world finally tells you enough? You rage. You deny. You shrink into the ritual, into the control, into teddy bears arranged like military regiments and tissues placed just so, because those were things he could control. Let's pause here. Think about it. Someone with power, status, access, and yet, obsessed with the trivial. That's not just odd. It's revealing. Because those compulsions, the micromanagement, the fussing, the scolding over a misfolded curtain or misplaced ornament, are symptoms of a larger problem. A fractured sense of self. A man who lost relevance clinging to control in the only place left, his fortress. And Royal Lodge was that fortress. A sprawling 30-room mansion nestled in the greenery of Windsor Great Park, far from the public eye, where image could be curated and reality manipulated. From the outside, it looked regal. Inside, it reportedly reeked of tension, staff anxiety, and rituals that made sense only to one man. This is where the conversation deepens. Andrew's fall isn't just a tabloid spectacle. It's a psychological case study. It's what happens when an institution refuses to evolve, when it raises men to believe service means being served, not serving. Insiders have said it plainly. Andrew never grew out of being the Queen's favorite. And perhaps that's where the tragedy began. While the world shifted, while monarchy attempted to modernize through William, Catherine, even Harry before that blew up, Andrew stayed rooted in an era where status was courtesy and accountability a foreign concept. He was a man frozen in time, a relic walking around in a modern world. Now, let's talk about the finances. Because if Andrew's behavior was disturbing, The way it was funded was nothing short of staggering. No active royal role, no clear income, yet multiple staff, luxury cars, extensive travel, and property maintenance on a scale most governments would envy. How, reportedly, through an invisible network of bacchanal deals, favors, and generous gifts from wealthy connections made during his years as a trade envoy. A role, by the way, he used not just to promote British interests, but allegedly to secure private luxuries, stays at palatial homes, yacht trips, use of private jets. All this without the public ever fully knowing where the line between public duty and personal indulgence blurred. The truth is, we still don't know how deep that financial rabbit hole goes. But we do know this: it was enough to keep Royal Lodge running like a kingdom, long after Andrew had been dethroned in public opinion. And that's where King Charles finally drew the line. The decision in 2025 to strip Andrew of his remaining titles and evict him from Royal Lodge wasn't just punitive. It was symbolic. A thunderclap announcing a new chapter, one where even bloodlines no longer guarantee protection. Charles, known for his cautious nature, made a bold move, sending a message not just to Andrew, but to the world. The monarchy will not burn itself to keep one man warm. Some say it was long overdue. Others whisper it was too little, too late. But one thing is certain, it was a seismic shift in royal tradition. Let's not forget, monarchies have, for centuries, thrived on secrecy, on control, on the invisible. But this was too big to hide. The public had seen too much. The pictures with Epstein, the ill-advised BBC interview, the arrogant tone, the absence of remorse. So when Andrew lost Royal Lodge, it was more than a real estate drama. It was the erasure of privilege. It was the undoing of a man who had mistaken being born royal for being untouchable. And yet, despite all of this, here's the part that stings: Andrew still does not seem to grasp the full scale of the damage. Reports suggest he resisted leaving the lodge, that he believed he might return to royal duties one day, that, somehow, the public would forget. But the public doesn't forget. Not anymore. Not in the age of digital receipts and international scandals. Not when victims have voices. Not when privilege is no longer enough to buy silence. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with an institution forced to reckon with itself. A monarchy that, for all its pageantry, is finally being asked to earn its place, not just inherit it. A family being told, loudly and clearly, you don't get to sit above the world anymore. And Andrew, he's the cautionary tale. The prince who lived like a king but answered to no one, until the world demanded an answer. What's left now is legacy. And the question that haunts all legacies. When the gold peels back, what do you find underneath? For Andrew, it wasn't nobility. It wasn't honor. It was tantrums, entitlement, teddy bears, and tissue paper. It was do it echoing through empty halls. But for the rest of us, and perhaps even for the monarchy itself, the lesson is sobering. Titles don't mean truth. And castles can't keep secrets forever. Let's go deeper. Because when you strip away the palace gates and the ceremonial titles, what you're left with isn't a misunderstood royal trying to find his way. You're left with a man who mistook legacy for license, and whose fall is the monarchy's most public moral reckoning in decades. The delusion of return, sources close to the family, the kind who only speak in whispers over silver tea sets, say Andrew has privately clung to the idea that his royal exile is temporary. Temporary. As if public opinion is something you can outwait. As if reputations magically rebuild themselves after globally televised disasters and photo ops with disgraced billionaires. And yet, in his mind, the door was still open. Just a crack. All it would take, he reportedly believed, was the right moment. A few charitable appearances, maybe a soft-focused documentary about his misunderstood side, and voila, redemption. But what Andrew doesn't understand is that the world has changed. The old PR playbook, the one full of strategic walkabouts and puff-piece interviews, doesn't work anymore. Not when your scandals involve jet-setting with Epstein, legal settlements in the millions, and a complete refusal to read the room. You don't get to come back from that with a smile and a ribbon cutting. The staff who saw too much. And while Andrew sat in denial, the staff who lived inside the lodge saw the truth every day. Behind the Baroque curtains and neatly trimmed hedges, morale was at a historic low. Not because they feared scandal, but because they were trapped in it. Imagine walking on eggshells in a royal mansion, knowing one misplaced tissue could lead to a tantrum. One delay in serving the exact brand of mineral water could spark a screaming match. Sources say some staff would deliberately call in sick just to avoid facing His Royal Highness's unpredictable moods. And yet, they stayed. Why? Because working in a royal residence used to be an honor, until it became a cautionary tale. One former valet, reportedly let go after failing to arrange Andrew's comfort items in the proper order, described the experience as serving a man who wanted to be worshipped but didn't want to lead. The finances nobody could explain. Then there was the money. The numbers never quite added up. No formal role, no working income, no apparent royal funding. And yet, the jets, the gifts, the private security, the residence upkeep, somehow, it all continued. Where was it coming from? Whispers grew louder. A mysterious benefactor here. A suspicious property deal there. Rumors swirled about shell companies, diplomatic favors from his trade envoy years, and even offshore financial vehicles in places no one dared name on record. At one point, Andrew was said to be considering selling a Swiss chalet, one he'd co-purchased with his ex-wife, to cover legal fees. But that plan fell apart under questions about how the chalet was purchased in the first place. To the public, it looked like a royal version of the Titanic, slowly sinking, but with the orchestra still playing. King Charles's quiet fury. And while the public watched in stunned disbelief, King Charles, now fully in his role as monarch, was reportedly furious. Not theatrically, not in the way tabloids imagine royal shouting matches, but in the cold, quiet, final way only a king can be. He made the calls. He issued the orders. He made it clear to courtiers, to his brother, to everyone, that the monarchy would no longer be held hostage by one man's refusal to accept responsibility. First came the removal of royal duties, then the patronages, then the military titles, and finally, the home royal lodge, Andrew's last stronghold. It wasn't just eviction, it was erasure. And Andrew, he reportedly fought it every step of the way. There were behind-the-scenes discussions, negotiations, refusals to leave. Some say he even hoped the Queen's will might protect him somehow. But it didn't. The message was clear. The era of impunity is over. The house that symbolized entitlement. Let's talk about Royal Lodge for a second. This wasn't some countryside cottage. It was a 98-acre estate with 30 rooms, manicured gardens, a private chapel, and a reputation for opulence. It symbolized everything the public was growing increasingly uncomfortable with: inherited privilege, unchecked power, and royal entitlement in a time when people were struggling with the cost of living. To see Andrew disgraced and jobless, living there as if nothing had changed, was like rubbing salt in a national wound. And when Charles finally revoked his lease and demanded the keys back, it wasn't just about optics. It was about justice. A line had been drawn. The monarchy was choosing survival over sentiment. And Andrew, he was on the wrong side of that line. Public reaction, from disgust to catharsis. When the news broke that Andrew had been forced out, public reaction wasn't mixed, it was visceral. Some called it too late. Others felt vindicated. Many questioned why the royal family had protected him for so long. But across social media, talk radio, and tabloid front pages, there was a rare sense of collective agreement. Finally, the man who once infamously said "I don't sweat" in a botched attempt at denying allegations was being held accountable, not in a court of law yet, but in the court of public decency. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.